I'm Syafiqah, and I'm here with Mas Umar. We're so excited to dive into our topic, roles of English skills for Indonesian students in facing global competitiveness. Joining us today is someone truly inspiring, Mr. Colm. Thank you so much for your kind visit to Stacia. We are so grateful to be with you today. We acknowledge you as the former director of the British Council Indonesia Education, English and Society in 2019 until 2022, and as the author of a research report for British Council Indonesia. You have like a lot of experience in English language education, both worldwide and in Indonesia. We are currently studying accounting and management at Stacia Surabaya, one of the private schools of economics in Indonesia, and we are interested in learning about your expertise. We are adaptable students ready to compete globally. So, without any further ado, my co-host, Mas Umar, will be leading this part of the discussion. Mas Umar, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you everyone, and thank you Vika, and thank you Mr. Downs. Hi everyone, I am Umar, and I'll be guiding the Q&A segment with Mr. Downs, and we've prepared some questions that we're sure will give us valuable insights into this topic. So without any further ado, Mr. Downs, for the very first question, um, here, as the job market becomes more global, how do you think the role of English will change? And what new trends should we prepare for, Mr. Downs?
Okay, well, first of all, I wanted to say thank you very much for inviting me to your podcast,
Thank
to
Thank you.
in your university in Surabaya. I'm really honored and pleased to be spending the day with you. And I had a great morning talking to lecturers and to students here. And I think this is a really, really fantastic School of Management and Accounting. Now, I'm really looking forward to all of these questions. And you started with a really big question, but I'll give
Yes.
you.
Yeah, sorry.
I'm not going to give you too long answers, so we can have as many questions as possible.
Okay.
But you're talking about the changing role of English or the job market and how English links to that. I think that is just really the main trend is a continuation of the importance of English globally. And I said to the students this morning that although I'm from the UK and English is my first language, English is now a global language. I don't feel like I have ownership of it anymore. I think it's a tool for greater inter sort of cooperation between companies and countries around the world. So it's an international language, and it is a kind of tool for us all to work together successfully, to cooperate successfully, to tackle big global challenges. And I think the kind of trend is that the importance of English to be part of this global community is just going to continue to grow. And linked to that, I think, whilst you don't necessarily need English in order to get a good job, you can just speak Bahasa Indonesian and you could be very successful in Indonesia. If you speak good English, you're going to have more opportunities. You already have more opportunities, and you're going to have even more opportunities in the future. I'll give you one example, which we might come on to later on, but things like scholarships. There are fantastic scholarships here in Indonesia, like the LPDP scholarships, but one of the barriers is English language proficiency.
Yes.
So if you speak good English, that's an opportunity that's open to you.
Okay, so there will be more opportunities for those who can speak English fluently, right, sir?
I think there'll be more opportunities, but I also
Yeah.
think that there will be more jobs even in Indonesia that will require people to speak English.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And will have minimum English requirements. And although some jobs might claim at the moment that you need English to get them, I think the implementation of that has been quite loose, partly because testing hasn't been very efficient previously. But with advances in technology and AI, I think testing is now affordable and efficient and quick. I think the government and companies are going to start using better tests to measure prospective employees' English before they give them a job. So I think it's going to quickly start to become a more rigorous requirement to get a job, even here in Indonesia.
Okay, thank you, sir. That's kind of insightful, yeah, from Mr. Downs, and hopefully everyone can get that level of, some get uh, getting better job or everything that they want to
If
achieve in life. Yeah.
I just want to add to that as well, because although I was speaking kind of to students to
Yes.
kind of encourage them to get English, improve their English and get certification and qualifications to improve their employability, I kind of also would like to just say from the other side of the coin, the perspective from the kind of government side or from company side, that now these AI tests and tools exist. I would encourage Indonesian government and local government, regional government, national government, as well as the private and public kind of sector that employ people, to start making use of those toys. That would start, setting standards in the country. So,
Okay.
and part of my job sometimes is to advocate for that and to help in that process.
Okay, that's a good standard in my opinion. Okay, maybe we will next to the question, Mr. Jones. Now we know that in this kind of environment in technology, we know that AI and automation is going rapidly in this world, including in Indonesia, right? And not limited to Indonesia, but also to internationally workplace. And in your opinion, Mr. Downs, how do you think AI and automation will affect the need for English skills and assessments in the workplace?
I think increasingly people who are good at English and have digital competence, are good at using computers, will have the edge. Okay, already, if you are able to use tools like ChatGPT efficiently and you're good at writing the right prompts,
Yes.
then you can, you do your essays and, faster. It helps me in my job, okay? So sometimes I might have to write a report. I now use AI to help speed up that process. But I'm only quicker at that process if I can use the tool efficiently. And in order to use the tool efficiently, I have to be familiar with it. I have to know the kind of report that I want to produce. What I mean is, if you don't have very good English language skills, then you won't be very good at using ChatGPT in English, because you won't be able to assess its output. You won't, So I think these two things go hand in hand. As you improve your English proficiency skills and you get more familiar with kind of digital apps and AI tools, then you can become extremely productive and very competitive. But and in the future you're going to need both. And the people who have both of those things are the people who are going to be successful entrepreneurs, and will be the people who get jobs. So things are changing. One, I would also like to add, I want to say a very nice thing about Indonesia now. That it's completely true, but maybe lots of Indonesians don't realize this. But Indonesia is very entrepreneurial and very good at using technology. In fact, what I see my Indonesian friends and some of my colleagues do with a mobile phone is far more advanced and far more sophisticated than my friends and my colleagues in the UK, right? So, the way in which Indonesians, can pay for services or transfer money or use a variety of different apps to get things done
Yes.
is much more efficient in Indonesia, and I think in Asia in general, than in the West, where
I just knew
progress
that.
is really, really way behind, okay? So in some ways you have these advantages. Often, sometimes people think, oh, we're a developing country, maybe we need to catch up with the West because they're like a more advanced economy or a more advanced country. But there are lots of ways in which actually there's more innovation here, and the West could learn from Indonesia. Yeah. So, but what's the difference? People in the West often speak, English
English
fluently.
fluent.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think I want to give Indonesians that confidence that people have the skills and the entrepreneurialism and the ideas, and when you combine that with English language proficiency, you have really, I think, big opportunities.
Okay, so that's interesting actually because we've never been to Europe and let's say to UK. We've never been to
Yes.
there, but we've learned that some things in Asia and Indonesia, especially, it is more more modern than there. I mean like we have some advantages from Europe and UK, and thanks to you, Mr. Jones, we've learned that today.
Honestly, people in Indonesia are much better at using mobile phones than people in
Oh
the
yeah,
UK.
hopefully. Okay, yeah, and maybe about this, we've talked about the AI, the automation, and the market global, right, Mr. Downs? And how about this? What are the biggest English language needs for Indonesian students to compete globally? Can you tell?
Well, I mean, in the last couple of questions, I've been talking about the importance of English and how English gives you these fantastic opportunities.
Yeah.
Okay, and at the moment, if we're very honest, the Indonesia does have a challenge in that, nationally, most people's level of English is relatively low. Okay, now there are exceptions, but most of the exceptions are relatively small, maybe in sort of the kind of sort of wealthier elite Indonesian um, population who had the benefit of an international education, and maybe their children have gone to international schools, and now they are also getting the benefit of an international education. They're fine, right? And there's Indonesia is a big country, so even though that's a small percentage of the population, it's still quite a lot of people who are doing very well and getting great jobs. Okay. Now, what I want to try to do, and I'm very keen, is about how do you reduce inequality. Again, there's inequality in every country. There's inequality in the UK, and there's inequality in Indonesia. There's a big gap between the skills and the opportunities for the elite and for most Indonesians.
Yeah, yeah.
And most Indonesians, they haven't necessarily had the best English teaching in school, haven't necessarily had lots of opportunities, to practice or improve their English even in university, and they are graduating with relatively low levels of English, which is creating that kind of barrier for them. Okay, now I think AI and technology we'll come on to, or maybe AI and technology more throughout this podcast, is one way in which we can help rapidly improve the quality of English teaching and assessment in schools and universities and reduce some of that inequality. So I can kind of go in lots of different directions with this question. But I'll
Sorry.
pause for a minute and let you rope me back in.
Okay.
The biggest challenge English language needs for Indonesian students
Right.
to compete globally.
So I was kind of saying, the biggest challenge as a country is how do you improve the English language proficiency skills of the whole country, right? Of the, let's say the majority, which are aspiring middle class or lower working class.
So
okay?
there isn't so much gap,
Right.
like you said before.
Yeah, so there's not a big gap.
Yes.
As a country, that's the biggest challenge. And actually, this is a very interesting side tangent and a very important thing to say, right? One of the most exciting things about Indonesia, when I love living in Indonesia, although I'm getting older, I feel young in Indonesia. And the reason I feel young in Indonesia is because
Why?
Indonesia is full of young people. And the average age in Indonesia,
Yeah.
the sort of the median, I think, is about 30 now. Okay. Now in Japan it's 44. Okay. In Korea it's mid 40s as well. Okay. Indonesia has more than 30 million people in primary school. It has 60 million people in education. Okay. It has a very young population. Now, and the population is still growing. It's not getting smaller. Okay. Now that they talk about this as Indonesia having a demographic benefit. Okay, so all of these young people are going to graduate, going to finish school, finish university, and going to work. Now, if they're highly skilled, and when they go into work, they'll get good jobs, and they will earn money, and then they will pay tax, and then the country will benefit from all of this productivity, and the economy will be great.
Yes.
All right, and so Indonesian economy is projected to grow. This is an exciting time for the next 50 years in Indonesia. Okay, however, there's also a risk with this huge number of young people. Okay, if they don't have a very good education at school, and if they don't have a very good education at university, if they finish their studies not being highly skilled or highly qualified and not being very competitive, then they might not get great jobs. Then they might not be
Yeah.
able to compete with other countries in ASEAN or Asia or globally. And then they might not be very well paid. And then very quickly, they'll get older, and they will become like a burden on the Indonesian economy rather than kind of this benefit. So this is why reducing inequality and improving quality and standards in schools and universities is so important, to realize that benefit. And English, I think, is key to improving Indonesia's global competitiveness, because of just the kind of importance of that skill in so many jobs these days. And in answer to the kind of question about an individual, the kind of biggest challenge for an individual, I think, is having the motivation to improve your own English, especially your productive skills, your speaking and your writing. Even though you might, right, like many students right now who'll be listening to this podcast, you might not have had the best English lessons at school. You might not be feeling very confident right now about your English language skills, but it's never too late to change. It's never too late to kind of improve. And now with the benefit of these tools, many of these free tools online, you can really do something about it, I think, and you can improve quite quickly.
Yeah, actually, I want to ask you a question. Talking about the English education, here in Stasia, we have a bilingual class called the ECAM class. So the materials and the lecturer teach us in English, but most students feel intimidated. Nah, what advice would you give to Indonesian students who feel intimidated by the idea of learning English fluently?
Okay, well, I think what's important with that word, I'm glad you used the word fluently. I said this morning in our kind of lecture at the university. Fluency doesn't mean perfection. The more fluent you are, kind of the better you are, but it doesn't mean that your English is error-free.
Yeah.
Okay, and I think that a lot of students in Indonesia, when they were at school, they were afraid of making mistakes, and I think that the kind of system of teaching focused heavily on grammatical accuracy, and you know students were afraid.
Yeah.
Their
Yeah.
teachers would often say, "Oh no, that's terrible. You've made a mistake," and then they would maybe be a bit shy. I hope, like through what I'm saying and through the work that I do in organisations like the British Council that try to kind of shift this way of teaching. Okay, so in order to improve your skills in any language, you should be using it as much as possible. Not be afraid of making mistakes, and trying to improve your fluency. Okay, and there's this accuracy comes through greater fluency. So I would say we need classroom environments and English clubs where students are all comfortable to make mistakes, comfortable to try and do things with their English that maybe a little bit beyond their capability, but they're having a go through things like debating, presentations, speech competitions. Even I've seen in some countries they have this idea of had a drama competition where groups would write a script and then they would act their script, perform a play to camera, or having a podcast like this.
Yeah.
This is, anybody now can have their own podcast and practice their English.
Yeah, so
Yes.
try to speak as much as possible instead of focusing on the grammar.
Completely. I mean, so don't worry about making mistakes at all.
Okay.
Okay. So we are talking about some people and some students in a big country, right? For example, in Surabaya, in Istisia, we have some English classes. But what about for those people, those students, sir, those students that have less advantages in learning English? How can we, as students from smaller or rural areas, uh, can make this English skills or English fluency can make them compete in a global or in an international workplace or like that?
Well, this is the thing now. So going back to the biggest challenge in Indonesia about
Yes.
how do you address inequality, how do you reduce the gap between the quality of education
Yes.
in villages and remote and rural areas and cities. Okay. So, for example, like this podcast, that I think is going to be on YouTube.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anybody in Indonesia could watch it, right? They could, if they know where to find it. Okay. So as long as they have a digital device, and I think 95% of people in Indonesia now have regular access to a smartphone, whereas only about 5% have access to a laptop or a computer. Okay. And I know because I've looked at research into this, that even during the pandemic, in rural and remote areas, people had started to learn how to follow webinars online because they had to, because school went online. Okay?
Yes.
So
Correct.
even in villages, students and their parents have started to get a lot more familiar in using digital tools. They've got data now, and there's better. You need to have a signal. You need to have a data package. So by improving this kind of digital literacy
Yeah.
and awareness and access, this is one way in which we can give equal access to resources to people all across Indonesia. But at the same time, we've got to work with teachers who teach in those rural areas and provide them with enough support and training as teachers who live in cities. Okay? There have been some good initiatives in the past, but Indonesia is so big. I think, the biggest challenge is the sheer size of the country. And so by having these kind of standardization tools or tools that can help standardize and improve things, then I think that's an opportunity for Indonesia, and an exciting one.
Okay. So there's no no tools that can limit everyone's eager to learn English, right, sir? So everyone can use every tool in this kind of environment. Actually, especially for the technological era like this, right, sir?
There is all still a risk, I've got to say. I mean, because most people who know how to use these tools effectively and efficiently are people in cities,
Yes.
and they have better phones and better laptops. So it's a risk that it's creating a wider gap because people in villages and rural areas maybe don't have such good gadgets, and they don't have such a good signal, and they don't have such high digital literacy. So there's also an argument that it can contribute to making an education system even worse. So we've always got to be very aware of that. So we definitely need to proactively support schools, teachers, parents, students in rural and remote areas with that whole package of things that they need. But now, yeah, if you've got that gadget, you've got a signal, you've got a data package, and you are motivated, that's the other thing, motivated to learn English, then you should be able to. And I know some very successful Indonesians in Jakarta that have come from villages.
That's
Yeah.
correct.
So, Mr. Jones, you have like a lot of experience in English education, both worldwide and Indonesia. What I want to know is what inspired you to work in the field of English education? What motivates you to continue this work?
It's a great question. I think if I was very simplistic, when I was very young, I looked at jobs in kind of, I would put them into two categories. So you were either trying to help people and you were
Yeah,
kind of,
yeah.
or you were going to make money.
Money. Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So that was it. Okay. And then I was like, lawyers just want to make money. But actually, I thought lawyers were all bad. But now you kind of open your eyes a bit. You can be a lawyer and you could be like a human rights lawyer helping people, right? So it's
Yes.
not black and white, okay?
Yes, correct.
But I think in all jobs, essentially it can come down to either you are trying to increase profit or help people. Sometimes you could do a bit of both. And I definitely wanted to help people. Now, I was a volunteer. Before I went to university, I took a gap year between finishing my school education and going to university. And during my gap year, I went on a program, and the program assessed my skills, and they said, we think you would be a good teacher, and we want you to go to Sri Lanka, and we want you to work for an NGO and teach poor children who are the children of tea plantation workers in the hills in Sri Lanka. And I was like, wow, okay, never even thought about it. But I went and I did that. And I lived outside my own country for a year, and I lived in the local community, and I found it very rewarding. And that was probably the most transformative experience of my youth, having that experience. And because I liked teaching English, I decided then to get some qualifications in that area. And although I didn't plan for this to become my career, that's the career path that I ended up going on. And it's changed at different points along the way. But I think really at the heart of what I'm doing now, now I'm a bit older and I reflect on it, and I said this a little bit earlier on, but the kind of big thing I'm trying to do is reduce inequality in systems, and to give people an equal chance in life.
So that gap year started everything you've been doing now.
Yeah. One of the other important things about that gap year, because these are lessons learned that I want to pass on to your kind of listeners. As much as I could only really assess my own country for its strengths and weaknesses very well when I was outside it. Okay? And I went through an interesting journey, actually. So when I first went to Sri Lanka, I was a bit like a typical expat, a Western expat, let's say overseas. I had in my mind that my country was great and the way that we did everything in the UK was the best way, and everything in Sri Lanka I needed to kind of help them to do things my way. I was like, why are you eating with your hands? Why are you doing this? I mean, why are you wearing these clothes? I had a bit of culture shock going in, but because I lived in the local community, part of the project was to kind of embrace that. What was interesting for me is that I completely immersed myself into Sri Lankan way of life, and I started eating with my hands, and I started dressing in a different way. I started behaving in a slightly different way. That I started to think Sri Lanka was the greatest country in the world, and everything in my own country was terrible. And then when I got back to the UK, I had a bit of reverse culture shock, and I reflected on all of this, and I realized that neither Sri Lanka nor the UK were the greatest country in the world, that they both had different things about them that I liked, and I could choose for myself which bits to keep in the way that I led my life. But maybe the key thing is I could see both countries clearly for what they were because I had experienced both and could compare them. And if you never live outside your bubble, if you never leave your village or your town and go and live somewhere differently for a time, even if it's just for a week or a month, it can be very hard to see the strengths and weaknesses of your own environment. And that's why I like all these scholarships programs, by the way, even if they're just for like a month or 6 months, because I think any opportunity for you to travel and live somewhere else, even if you realize through that experience, I think a lot of people in Indonesia might think, oh, the UK is much better than Indonesia or Switzerland or whatever. It's like, and that's the dream. And then, but what would happen is, I think most cases, you would go to the UK or you go to Switzerland or go to Australia, and yeah, it would be great, but you would realize all the great things about Indonesia that you hadn't really appreciated.
That's a
And
really
you only
fascinating
appreciate
point.
it until you haven't got it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so
I rambled
it's
on. Sorry, I'm meant to be going to these questions quickly, but yeah, I think, and even though in Indonesia you could do that, right? And I wanted, there's
Yeah.
another point I really want to make is that Indonesia is such a diverse country,
Country.
is that people in Jogja are very different from people from Lake Toba or
Yes.
Sulawesi, right? So you could just go and spend a little bit of time in a different bit of Indonesia, and you're still doing the same thing.
Okay, so we've learned that you've been to many countries, right, sir, including Sri Lanka and also Indonesia, right? How long have you been in Indonesia, and what is the most surprising thing you've learned about Indonesian culture since moving here, sir?
Okay, so I came in 2012
All right.
because SBY, the former president, wanted to improve the English language skills of Indonesian peacekeepers.
Okay.
So I ended up living in Sentul near Bogor on a military peacekeeping training center. So that's 13 years ago now.
All
And I
right.
worked with the military and the police for 4 years. But then I left Indonesia and I went to Palestine for 3 years. And I lived in Ramallah and I used to work in the West Bank and Gaza.
Okay.
And then I came back to Jakarta and I have been back in Jakarta since 2019 until now. So now it's kind of home. And the most surprising thing, that's a difficult, I could say lots of things. Honestly, okay, the thing I want to say is not so surprising, maybe. I've been reflecting, why do I like living in Indonesia so much? And there's many reasons why I like living in here.
Yeah.
I think that Indonesian people and British people have a very similar funny sense of humor. And we both, Indonesian people are quite laid back and relaxed, but we have both a similar witty, dark sense of humor sometimes.
All right.
And so there's things that we have in common, right?
Yeah,
Is very, maybe that's
that's
one of the reasons I like being in Indonesia.
Okay, that's interesting actually, right? Yeah. And do you have any favorite Indonesian word or phrase, sir?
I'll give you some quick answers.
Yeah.
I don't know, you can tell me the right way to pronounce this, okay?
Okay.
Okay.
Because I like using it in my tweets or
Okay.
posts on X, but this waka 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 waka. And I know that on the text version it's WK. But that's a short version for awak awak awak.
Yeah, that's correct.
So what does it actually mean?
Actually, we do not pronounce it like we do not speak it. We just type it.
So nobody, but
Yeah, nobody pronounce it.
what is it if you pronounced it? If you
Nobody pronounced that.
Yeah, nobody pronounce wika, but
It's
it
just
means
how we
we
type
laugh.
when we
LOL.
laugh. Yes.
And I like that rather than LOL. So
Me
I
too.
use waka waka. Yeah, so that's one of my favorites. A few words. The most important, if you're a foreigner and you come to Indonesia,
Yeah.
the most important kind of English in Jakarta, this is, but probably also in Surabaya, a big city,
Okay.
is I remember, I think in the first week I learned the word for U-turn, putar balik, because the traffic was so bad.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
I'm trying to direct taxis.
Yeah.
Turus, kiri, kanan, and putar balik.
Okay.
So if you didn't know the U-turn, you
Putar
could spend
balik.
an extra half an hour in traffic.
That's correct.
So, talking about Indonesia, what's the most adventurous or unique activity you've tried in Indonesia?
I climbed Rinjani and slept at the top of Rinjani, which was exciting, and I recommend everybody do that once. My favorite thing to do is snorkeling or diving in Komodo.
Yeah, yeah.
And the reason it's so good in Komodo is because actually it is quite interesting. You look at historical maps of Indonesia, right? Go back thousands of years.
Okay.
So a lot of like Sumatra and Java and Kalimantan, that all used to be part of
Yes.
one big block.
Yes.
And then these other islands were like part of Australia, right? And the kind of sea went through the middle, like near Lombok and Komodo. That was kind of the path of the oceans, right? And then it all broke up, and then
Yeah.
there's lots of islands, okay?
Yeah.
And there's this whole, we could talk about the Wallace line
Yes,
between Bali and
Wallace.
Lombok and South, and the theory of evolution. So Komodo, obviously it's where the Komodo dragons are, but it's also where these seas kind of meet and mix. So it's a kind of route, an international route, an old historical international route for like whale sharks and other amazing fish. So that's why it's such a great place to go diving. See manta rays.
Yeah.
So, you know that here in Surabaya, of course, the weather is so bad, like the heat. What's your secret to handling Indonesia's hot and humid weather?
Whoa, it is hot. People actually, I was in Jakarta and they said, "Oh, you're going to Surabaya? It's so hot."
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it does get hot. My secret is I swim a lot. I love swimming. In Jakarta, I can tell you about the best swimming. Maybe I need to learn where are the good swimming pools in Surabaya. So I think people should swim more because I think it's really good for you and it can cool you down. And there's great swimming pools in Jakarta. I go to the aquatic center at Gbk, which got renovated for the ASEAN Games. It's like 3 50-meter pools. It's really beautiful. I cycle there. I do worry about the pollution. And I get very hot cycling, but so it's not a very good way for managing my temperatures. But the swimming itself is good. Yeah, I get you again, like what I was talking about when you live overseas and you sort of embrace your new environment. Interestingly, like your body also physically can adapt. So I've got used to the heat in Indonesia. Maybe when I first came here, I would be sweating a lot,
Yeah.
but now my body's kind of used to it.
Okay.
In fact, I was recently back in the UK and I was freezing cold because I wasn't used to it. My body was
Yeah.
in shock.
Yeah. Your
Yeah.
body's adapting.
So,
You do a lot of exercise here also.
yeah, I actually, people talk about this is foreigners and expats, and you know, this is quite funny. They call Indonesia the 10-kilogram posting, right? People get posted here as a diplomat, so it's the 10-kilogram posting. Meaning, if you get sent to Indonesia during your 3 years or 4 years, you will put on 10 kilograms because
Yeah.
the food is tasty and
Yeah.
fried,
Yeah.
and people don't really walk anywhere. You're just getting, you go by Gojek or Grab, you get a motorbike or a taxi.
Yes.
You're not doing any walking. Like in London, I would walk to the bus stop. I would walk to the underground. I would then walk to the university. I would do my 10,000 steps a day easily. Indonesia, it's difficult
Yeah,
to do
yeah.
your 10,000 steps, right?
Yeah.
So I would say to all students, you got to find a way to do your 10,000 steps, and it's not easy in Indonesia, which
Yeah.
is why I go swimming or play badminton or do
Because we
cycling.
avoid the weather.
You avoid the weather, and public transport or private transport, petrol's quite cheap. People
Yeah.
have motorbikes.
Yeah, that's correct.
But there's a health crisis coming, right? Because
Yes,
this
yes.
country, people were farmers. They used to maybe eat lots of fried food, but it didn't matter because you worked in the field.
Yeah.
Now, if you got a government job and you're on a computer, but you eat KFC every day, it's not good. So we've all got to be healthy. I've got to have less snacks, Indonesian, like I like this dada gulung and other things like
What's
that.
your favorite food
In
here?
Indonesia,
Yeah.
garu-garu, soto.
Yeah.
Tempeh. Tempeh's, I like tempeh. I recently had a TLT, tempeh, lettuce and tomato sandwich.
Okay. That's interesting.
Okay, so that's bring us to the end of today's insightful discussion. Thank you so much for sharing this valuable insights,
you,
Mr.
Mr.
Jones. I'm sure our listeners will take away many practical strategies to enhance their English proficiency and career prospects. A huge thank you to you, Mr. Comtown, for sharing such valuable insights. And to our listeners, we hope you've picked up some ideas to help you sharpen your English skills and get ready for the global stage. Remember, small steps every day can lead to big results down the road. Thank you for tuning in to this podcast brought to you by Stasia Surabaya. Don't forget to share this episode with your friends and keep an eye out for inspiring conversations coming your way. Take care, stay curious, and we'll see you next time. Bye
See
bye.
you guys. Okay, thank you, Mr. Jones. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you very
much.
It was fun. I took a lot.